Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar, How to Ticket and Price Your Events, Virtual, Hybrid, and in person. You are likely joining us today because you're looking to make the most of these new opportunities that are presented in this new landscape that we have on our hands. And yet, you now have to choose from this dizzying array of formats. You've got ticketing options, and then there's also, oh, by the way, pricing strategies. But even still, we know that events remain this great way to engage with our customers, our partners, and our prospects. But how do you start to create an event that really generates the most value for your business? And then how do you price it so that people are willing to pay that right amount without leaving money on the table? And so today's webinar is going to take an in-depth look at ticketing and pricing strategies for those virtual, in-person, and hybrid events that are all part of your portfolio now. You'll start to learn a little bit more about some of the benefits and the limitations of each of those formats, as well as how to start to structure some ticketing and pricing strategies that can deliver the value, and we'll stress the word value today, that attendees and your sponsors might be seeking. Just some quick introductions here. My name is Alyssa Peltier. I am a senior manager on our marketing strategy and insights group as part of our Cvent consulting team here at Cvent. Our team works with large enterprise companies to deliver better event technology solutions that are aligned to those corporate goals or desired outcomes. So, for example, driving revenue for your events. I am joined today by my colleague, Paulina Giusti. Hey, Paulina, welcome to the virtual stage.
Hey, Alyssa, you guys have the dynamic duo again. As Alyssa mentioned, I'm Paulina Giusti, Senior Manager for Cvent's Meetings and Events team. I oversee our event design team, who is largely responsible for producing our external customer and prospect-facing programs such as Cvent Connect North America and Cvent Connect Europe, but we also produce a number of smaller scale programs as well as our internal events. And really excited to talk with all of you today about thinking about your ticketing and pricing strategy for your unique programs.
Perfect.
Awesome. So before we get going, I want to make sure everyone is aware of some fun housekeeping notes. Please feel free to keep the conversation flowing by utilizing the chat tab. We are going to be using written Q&A for this session. So as questions come to mind, thoughts come to mind, please make sure to submit those questions in the Q&A tab. If by chance someone's already asked a question that you were even thinking about, be sure to upvote it so that it gets, to the top of our pool. And lastly, this entire session will be emailed out and made available on demand for your easy reference. So really looking forward to lots of engagement in the engagement tab of the session today.
Awesome. So let's take a look at today's agenda. So we'll start by discussing a little bit of this new event landscape. I think we've talked about that a lot on our webinars lately, but go a little bit deeper on some of those new formats that now provide various benefits within that total event program or your event portfolio. Secondly, we'll shift to explore some options for finding value and ROI in those programs. And then lastly, we'll spend some time discussing the creating of a value-based ticketing and pricing model. And again, the key word here is value. So why are we here today? Let's kind of tee things off a little bit. Although the pandemic has made it more challenging to monetize events, organizations are finding innovative ways to drive that value. On the one hand, we've seen planners and marketers, they're really struggling to recoup some of the costs in a world where many events are not only virtual, but they're now free. But at the same time, this tectonic shift to virtual, and also now that we have in-person events coming back into the fold, this hybrid event notion, it's bringing this opportunity to reach more attendees than ever before. And so this landscape has really shifted how organizations and professionals are starting to plan, how they're marketing, and how they're selling those events. And so some of these things remained unchanged. And it's really critical to know your customers deeply, to tailor your value propositions to them, and really understanding your audience's challenges, their motivations, and their aspirations is the key to that engagement, to driving that revenue and beyond. And so now we have unprecedented access to newer and larger audiences. these event marketers, these event planners have this chance to rethink those strategies around the monetization and developing of new ways to create and to capture that value. And so you've just got more opportunities at your hand, that you can think beyond ticket sales and start to recognize, what we would call like the hidden value within those events. And so we're going to get down and dirty with some of that stuff today. But some of these new models, these methods, some confusion and many questions start to arise. What types of registration types should I even be offering? How much should I charge for these events? Should I tailor my price points for different audiences? Can I even make money on these free events? And how would I start to even prove ROI of these new programs if I don't even have a ticketing model to begin with, right? If they are free. So I'd love to pass the floor over to Paulina to really take us a deep dive into some of these new event formats.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. Yeah, so to dive a little deeper into what Alyssa's saying here, events have evolved into three distinct formats. We're familiar with virtual, in person, and hybrid. We've been talking about it on so many webinars. And understanding the benefits and limitations of each event format really helps you contextualize that potential value you can deliver to your attendees, your sponsors, and of course, how it impacts your organization. You can start to translate that value into ticketing and pricing that's right for your event. So, two key factors to weigh when considering event formats are the depth of your engagement that you create and the breadth of your potential audience. So, let's explore what that looks like for each of these event formats. And let's kick it off with virtual events. So, virtual events can provide exponential reach and scale. They're powerful tools to attract attendees from a variety of backgrounds, roles, functions. Thousands of people can attend an event from across the globe. They also offer organizations the opportunity to extend the value of event content beyond the event itself. So, while the audience might be larger, virtual events have less depth of engagement than in person events. I think we can all agree to that. People multitask, have, direct connections can be harder to forge, and attention spans are certainly limited. So, audiences may be less willing to pay for the event since their commitment to the experience is lower than if they were to attend in person.
Yeah, let's talk on the converse, right? The in-person events are tried and true formats. We all know that's kind of what we expect, and will continue to be part of our event programs moving forward. By nature, they foster more meaningful relationships with and among attendees and sponsors. We saw that a lot at our Cvent Connect conference that we held just a couple months ago. And these relationships can lead to stronger business partnerships. They can lead to more lasting connections between people who share that experience within that same venue. In person events also offer that greater depth of engagement, like Paulina was just alluding to, but oftentimes with a more limited breadth of engagement, as they're only limited to those who can make the trip. The audience is typically more willing, though, to pay for a ticket to attend that in person for that depth of engagement, for the intensity of engagement that the event can provide.
Yeah, so hybrid events provide planners kind of the best of both worlds, in my opinion. Combining virtual and in person formats really offers a depth of engagement in person while reaching that broad audience virtually. The result really is a flexible experience for any attendee and offers more ticketing options. The challenge, though, is to deliver value to all attendee groups since virtual and in person experiences are unique. Producing effective hybrid events increases complexity and requires more resources. At the same time, though, planners can tailor event content to each audience to really maximize both engagement and ROI. Hybrid events, they provide flexible ticketing options depending on the experience that an individual chooses. So, for example, some in person attendees of hybrid events may be willing to pay a higher price for access to on demand content to complement their on site experience.
Yeah, so where do we start, right? So to price and to ticket your event optimally, you've got to define its value for all of those different stakeholder groups. So in an event, it's your attendees, possibly your sponsors if you have those as part of your event, and then your business or your organization itself. And you can start to maximize that value by mapping it to the relevant attendee, to the sponsor, and then to those organizational goals. Maximizing your value can lead to higher ROI for your organization and ultimately a more rewarding experience for your audiences as well. So many organizations focus on just ticket sales. We heard that a lot as the pandemic started to come down upon us as that key driver of ROI. So, if we lost ticket sales, how would we even quantify ROI? That was the question we were getting a lot. But ticket sales are just but one slice of a much larger ROI pie. And Cvent has identified the 5 benefits that contribute to event ROI, which is great. We've kind of done some of the legwork for you. So, the first, direct revenue. This is made up of those ticket sales, your sponsorship dollars, maybe advertising sales that you have, maybe any merchandise that you're selling, exhibitor booths, maybe even government grants that you have. It's direct revenue tied to your event. Now let's look at another piece of revenue. This could be attributed revenue. That is defined as revenue after the event that was influenced by perhaps product demos or interaction at your event experience, perhaps with your sales that's been staffed during the event or any type of influencer. It's tied to your event, but it's attributed. It's not as a direct result. Third, attributed sales pipeline. So we're starting to get into marketing and sales methodology here, but those are leads and opportunities generated at the event that eventually become sales or can eventually become sales. But it's the bigger picture of that total pipeline that you have. It's that big piece of the pie. Fourth, brand equity. So if attendees have a positive experience, an impression of your brand as it relates to the event, that also is driving business value to your organization, and should have some level of, you should be able to quantify that in some way. So again, if you have a free event, but you have hundreds of thousands of people attending this virtual experience, what's the value of all of those brand impressions to your organizations? Just having clicked on a logo, seen your logo, seen some content, but you didn't necessarily have a ticket sale. What is the value of that? What about knowledge exchange? So this is just simply the act of sharing information and insight between those customers or between your prospect groups and amongst the organization at large. What is that value to your organization when there's knowledge exchange? So when you start to assess that full value of your events, you must look at all of those benefits that they can provide to your organization along with those costs. There's so many things beyond that direct revenue that we talked about in our first quadrant here that impact how much money an event will make. It can take time for some of those things to come to fruition, but it's really important to include them in that total ROI calculation. If you are interested in trying to get a better picture, better handle of the ROI for your organization, for your events, we have added a copy of Cvent's Essential Guide to Event ROI within the quick links section of the Attendee Hub today. So feel free to download a copy of that if you want to take this conversation the next level and apply it to your business as well.
You have sort of that understanding of how to evaluate the ROI and value. It's important to remember as event professionals to look through and view value through the eyes of all of your stakeholders. So while you can highlight event value in sort of objective terms, right? Number, type of sessions, speakers, exhibitors. What really matters most is how your stakeholders perceive the event. So imagine yourself in the shoes of attendees, sponsors, and internal stakeholders by asking about their needs and their desires before and after the event. What you'll discover is how your event can help them succeed and achieve their goals. Very much, pillars of what event design is really founded upon. So to expand your thinking and to uncover hidden value, answer the following questions with as much detail as possible. What will my attendees get out of the event? What are the benefits to my sponsors or partners? How does this event bring value to the business or the organization? So let's take a look at attendee focused value. And the best way to maximize value for attendees is really by understanding their interests and motivations for going to your event. Leverage historical data, surveys, feedback forms, interviews, and other tools that can help you craft the most valuable attendee experience. From the first moment they interact with your brand to the moment they leave your event. Look for ways to address their pain points and provide value through education, entertainment, networking, high touch support, status, convenience, or other business benefits. Let's look at the next value to evaluate, sponsor focused value. Sponsors support events when they help their organizations achieve higher goals, such as increasing revenue, driving sales leads, positioning them as leaders in their industries, or gaining media exposure. So, the best way to find hidden value is by understanding sponsors' business needs. For example, building brand awareness, increasing reach or engagement, strengthening loyalty with existing companies, customers, and acquiring new customers or raising funds. All of this is really critical into ensuring that you're delivering valuable experiences for your sponsor stakeholders. The next one, organization focused value. Find that internal value by aligning your event to your organization's key business objectives. One of the more critical event design processes, right? For example, if the company's goal is to build a sales pipeline, an event may aim to gather leads from qualified prospects with a high value item, excuse me, leads from qualified prospects. If its goal is to drive revenue, an event may target existing customers with a high value item or service they can purchase on site. Internal goals are not always related to direct revenue or ticket sales. An event's purpose could be to enhance brand identity and awareness, or perhaps showcase product innovations or highlight corporate culture. Be sure to factor in those intangible benefits like knowledge exchange, sales pipeline, and attributed revenue into the equation when looking for hidden value. Once you've defined what value means to each group, you can use this information to build value propositions that are unique, authentic, and compelling. By focusing on value for all three groups, you can price your event accordingly and maximize ROI. So, now that you've defined the value for what you want to provide, let's look at how value-based ticketing and pricing can help you translate that value into packages attendees and sponsors will love. So, ticket price is not really just about calculating costs and adding a profit margin. It's also about how much people want what you're selling. A value based ticketing strategy finds ways to ensure each buyer's perceived value of the experience equals or exceeds the price that they pay. So, perceived value is the impression that a person forms about your event's worth based on their perspective. It exists only in people's minds. So, as you solve their biggest problems or satisfy their most important desires, perceived value goes up. Let's explore some techniques that can influence perceived value and consequently ticket demand and price.
I love this next section. A lot of practical and actionable tips for the audience. So make sure you guys are paying attention to this one. And maybe even take notes on some of these bullets. So we're going to start with the first one here. Perhaps start with some flexible pricing options. Using a tiered pricing system can add that level of flexibility to your event programs. And, Paulina alluded to this earlier, but the hybrid model is kind of the end all be all of that, right? It's maximum accommodation. And oftentimes that manifests itself with different options for payment. And so offering those packages ranging from potentially free to maybe premium or super premium, all the way up to a full-on paid experience. But meet those audiences where their pocketbooks are and where they're willing to invest. It's what Paulina was just talking about, right? You have to meet them at their threshold. We want to maintain the reach, but we also are able to earn that depth of engagement by offering these types of scaled models. Tiered pricing also can help you find that right balance of supply and demand and start to match those ticket costs to those perceived value levels. So, a couple of different examples that we've seen in practice. Offering individuals free tickets that include access to just view digital plenary or general session content. That's a pretty common model that we've seen, especially in the hybrid space. We've seen paid tickets that include access to all digital content, including those plenaries, keynote speakers, but also then access to programming recordings. So not all of the live breakout, but they can get recordings after the event is over. So there's a little bit of that FOMO experience. They don't get the content live. They don't necessarily have access to live Q&A experiences, but they do have this learning opportunity after the fact. We've also seen these models for upgraded ticket packages that could include all the above, like we just outlined, but then also maybe more tactile experiences, more experiential type things, like a voucher for a local meal delivery service to bring you lunch or coffee or a gift card. You can also reserve seats at virtual breakout session tables, and those could be at a discounted rate. You know, you're paying a little bit more for this premium level experience, but it's cheaper than perhaps attending the event in person. Paulina, do you want to take the next one?
Being able to differentiate your event by offering exclusive content that perhaps costs more to produce, right? You are sourcing external keynote celebrity speakers. There's a cost attributed to that. Perhaps charging is a way to offset that cost. And so creating gate this high value content behind the paywall. In this scenario, perhaps, general sessions are all access, but more niche content or specific content requires an upgrade. This approach lets you grant high value attendees access to content more suited for their needs while still satisfying more budget conscious attendees with standard content. The vast majority of attendees join for educational experiences. So, by offering a variety of course levels for content, you can also intermix free and paid programming there as well. An example of this type of model is, introductory content, 101 level sessions. Assume that's free for attendees' interests and encourage them to go a little bit deeper, right? So for that deeper content, that level 201, 301 plus level sessions, that might have a fee given the sort of more seniority user experience.
Yeah, that is a perfect segue to offering premium training too, right? So training is different than learning and development type content. So think about differentiating even your types of content too. For example, training materials, those tools, those learning guides, or the ability to even receive certifications or continuing education credit can start to incur costs that you'll want to recoup with ticketing fees. You have subject matter experts that might be delivering that. You might have a whole department that's relegated to your training certification programs. So if the value, again, to stress that word value, if the value of that content is transparent, audiences will be willing to pay no matter the event format, but not only delivering that great content showcases your event expertise, but that can be a huge draw for future attendees as well.
Yeah, and I think, the next sort of section is to really, let's maintain the integrity of the experience and the content, right? Keeping quality standards, ensuring your event is worth whatever that high perceived ticket price is and adhering to a standard of excellence. Ensure that only high quality speakers and or exhibitors are allowed and that your organization is really delivering a superior service. Those high standards can help maximize revenue while also delivering quality experiences for attendees. And the longer and the better of a experience, you start to see return attendees and draw for future attendance as well. But I think there's something to be said about maintaining the integrity of the content that you are charging for.
Right, and how much your organization is willing to put forth in terms of effort is how much you can expect to receive in terms of audience investment too. I think that's the important takeaway there, right? So thinking about special perks, we kind of mentioned this in the flexible pricing discussion, but consider having delivering perks like those gifts, those tangibles, those swag items, or potentially meals is a way to up level the experience and encourage engagement. And so these might something that you choose to include in that tiered pricing plan, like we talked about, or they might be a way to capture more attention from attendees and ultimately drive the intangible value of that event. So both of those are kind of options at your disposal.
Yeah, and sort of the next layer to those special perks is, VIP experiences, giving super premium ticket holders access to, invitation only exclusive experiences that are not available to the basic ticket holders. These can include additional networking events, VIP speaker sessions with Q&A time, catered meals in unique settings or venues. Think gift certificates for meals if you have a digital audience, or perhaps increased levels of access to exhibitors or sponsors. So you can offer these experiences before, you can offer them during, and even after the event. So for virtual events, VIP experiences can include more interaction options or private breakout sessions for attendees who purchase higher priced tickets.
I love that. I love that. I think our next one is kind of one of those tried and true tactics, event marketing tactics. I know when I lived a former life as an event marketer, I'm very familiar with the time sensitivity and offering kind of time-based incentives. But those really are what allow audiences to capture that lower ticketing rate before it starts to increase over time. Audiences can start to lock in those discounted rates in favor of securing those registrations early on in your promotional plan. And this is really what helps set your guarantees for your on-site experience versus what can happen in the virtual space, where you don't necessarily need to save a seat or plan for those F&B costs. You can, though, create those discount codes, or you can conduct flash sales for both in-person and virtual audiences. We know that urgency is such a powerful driver that you can use to encourage those audiences to register sooner than later, but just be mindful of the differences in registration behaviors for your virtual audiences versus your in-person. It's very likely that your in-person audiences are going to be registering much earlier than your virtual audiences, who could be deciding to join you honestly the day of or just a few minutes before. So those are things to keep in mind as you're mapping out your promotional plan. You could also include in that strategy your option for exhibitors and sponsors in these limited time or these time-based offers. So you're starting to incentivize the not just your general population, your general audience, but also those other paying groups with those sales offers. And they can start to create buzz around the new products, around the new services, or that information that they're securing with you as a result of engaging with your event. And so it doesn't just add value to attendees, but it can also increase that ROI for those sponsors and exhibitors as well.
Yeah, and I think, as event professionals, we know that so many of our events cannot be, a success without the support of amazing sponsors and partners. So, one of the great things about these new event formats is that, we can double down on that breadth, right? That reach, and you can give sponsors more access to perhaps audiences they didn't, have access to before. So aim to create these packages that provide access to all audiences at varying tiers of investment. And being able to articulate that and communicate that to your sponsors is really, really impactful. So, ensure that, sponsors are, you're communicating to them that they can reach different levels of exposure and have new ways of engaging with attendees. The potential benefits are many, and they definitely extend far beyond typical practice of lead generation. So, like I said before, communicating value clearly so that they know what they're getting, more bang for their buck with your event is hugely, hugely important. Sponsorship opportunities might also include events that take place before or after the live event or the main event, and maybe aren't included in your registration or attendee experience. So, selling sponsorship opportunities outside of your core ticketed activity can really open up new revenue streams and, also foster stronger relationships with those sponsors and partners.
Yeah, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about just fostering connections at large. When you're considering that pricing structure, remember that profound value of the connections that are made through events, especially in your in person environments. Now, we're seeing attendees really gravitate towards roundtable networking and just all the networking type events that are done through that are hosted through your event experience, not just the content and the learning anymore. And so, what value does that carry to your organization and to your attendees as well? And how can you build an event design or an event agenda that fosters those deepening of connections and conversations with attendees? And furthermore, when you prepare that pricing, maybe include rates with options for more one-on-one time, more opportunities to connect, because we just see that being so popular within the market right now. I think it's so important to stress that creating that meaningful attendee experience is just vital to producing a profitable event. And understanding, the elements of value and how they make attendees feel is really going to help you determine that proper fee structure to begin with. And if you can provide that value and that unforgettable experience, your attendees will be happy to pay, your sponsors will be happy to pay, your exhibitors will be happy to pay, and your organization will get the return on any of those outcomes that we were discussing earlier, just that much more easily, even in this new event landscape.
Yeah, and as I think about all of the things we've just talked about over the last, 15 minutes or so, is how we put it all together for Cvent Connect. And there is quite a bit of trialing, trial and error, risk taking. Certainly in our 2021 program, we used a variety of pricing levers when coming up with our ticketing and pricing strategy for Cvent Connect 21 and 22. We adopted what I want to call flexible pricing to create three offerings. Cvent Connect is a hybrid event. And so we offered a free virtual experience, a premium virtual experience, and we offered the in person experience. So three really unique experiences. All taking place over one event date, and by offering premium content and these special perks, by limiting access and creating VIP experiences, we were able to establish higher ticket values for the premium and in person tiers while also increasing sponsorship value. So, taking all of what we've discussed, leveraging time sensitive incentives to create urgency and to entice registrants was deeply part of our strategy. And there were some unique findings too in areas where hybrid may have increased budget costs, what have you. What we were able to see was that, integrating a premium virtual experience had some considerable budget offset opportunities. And so, where we were investing a little more to support a really comprehensive hybrid offering, we were able to make up dollars with a different revenue stream by way of virtual premium registration. So, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we also really used engagement and collaboration features in this event attendee hub platform to foster what Alyssa was just talking about, connections. I think so much appetite has grown about fostering connections, reconnecting with, attendees, providing those networking opportunities. That's really driving value for participation. So, identifying where that networking experience made sense to perhaps add a price point to. I think all of that was really integral to the success of how we architected our ticketing and pricing structure for Cvent Connect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Paulina. I think it's really helpful to just see like a practical case study in use. I mean, I know we use Cvent Connect a lot, but we often don't talk about the pricing strategy, and there's a lot of thought that goes into that. There is truly a strategic vision that gets put in, and we're still trialing. And experimenting with the ticketing and pricing strategy for that event as well. We learn year over year. We learned from the 2021 event. We applied some of those findings into 2022, and I have no doubt that we'll continue to build on what that strategy looks like moving into 2023 as well. But I think it's really helpful to have that example. So thank you for sharing that. So just to wrap here, I just want to kind of summarize everything that we've talked about. I think in this new event landscape, you I hope that it's come across that you have so many opportunities to create and capture value. We now know that events can be virtual. We know that events can be in person. We know that they can be a little combination of both in this hybrid format, but each format has its own inherent benefits and its own inherent limitations. And so the key is really to understanding what those attendees, what those sponsors want, what your business is looking for out of each of those events, and driving that value. And that way you can start to maximize that ROI, whether it's through direct revenue, like ticket sales, sponsorships, or or if it's other forms of ROI, like sales pipeline, sales, just lead generation, brand equity, or knowledge transfer. That value based ticketing and pricing method is really going to help you deliver on that promise of creating true outcomes, true value for those attendees and those sponsors. So it's time to start to apply those lessons to your own events. And we're really, really excited that you were able to join us today. Paulina, any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for joining us today. Just as a reminder, this recording will be available and as a resource to you in the Attendee Hub. So next time you log in, feel free to watch us on demand. If you found today's content valuable and you want to kind of take it to the next level, feel free to register for our upcoming webinar, Using Your Events to Build Your Pipeline and Revenue on June 16th. Should be a wonderful conversation with our colleague, Melissa Patterson. Thank you all so much for joining, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye, everyone.